I don't, oh, it's recording.
Did you get a symbol of it being recorded?
Yeah.
Okay. Cynthia's the host right now. I just want to make sure it still worked.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. Hope you're not too disappointed in the change in topic. But this is the one that was scheduled. Anyway, what we're going to be talking about tonight, and I do mean we, since I hope everybody will join in this conversation. We're going to be talking about psychophysiological bases for some supernatural manifestations. And I've been really interested in this since I was a graduate student. I was interested before when I was a kid. I used to read all kinds of things about psychics and whatnot. But looking at the actual studies, I became interested during graduate school because it's very interesting that so many people have so many similar experiences, but in spite of decades and decades of attempts to record ghosts, there's actually no good recordings. You know, all of the stuff you see on TV and whatnot, that's generally a hoax. So what I wanted to chat with you about is what we do know. Very, very importantly, this presentation doesn't identify the bases for all manifestations that people experience, but it covers many of them. Just because we know what causes many perceptions that used to be in the realm of the supernatural doesn't mean that there aren't manifestations that we don't have the tools or senses to detect. So that's a crucial idea. Remember, y'all can break in whenever you want. Supernatural refers to the concept that something beyond natural, in other words, beyond what we normally think of as being part of our regular lives. The variety of things that can be thought of as supernatural has been shrinking as science gets better at understanding both natural phenomena and what our senses can detect. If the manifestations that we're talking about are ghosts, if you believe in ghosts, you're not alone. Cultures all over the world believe in spirits that survive death to live in another realm. In fact, ghosts are among the most widely believed paranormal phenomena. Millions of people are interested in ghosts, and a Harris poll found that 43% of Americans believe in ghosts. So that's a huge, huge chunk of the population. There are limitations of what our senses impact our interpretation of what's actually out there. In other words, what you sense is limited by the capabilities of what you sense is limited by the capabilities of your senses. It could be that someone is standing next to you right now that you simply can't sense. Our senses have developed over the eons to provide the information we need to survive and prosper in our natural environments. They don't pick up everything that's out there because our sensory capabilities need to be honed to be as effective as possible to pick up what we need to know right now to survive. And the sensitivities of our senses change from very early childhood through adulthood. So in other words, little kids can sense things that we cannot sense as easily. as adults. And we'll go into that more in a little bit. Objects that are not sending out wavelengths that we can sense may not be able to be detected without special devices. The most common example is that when you look up at the stars at night, you only see stars broadcasting in wavelengths we can see. So we miss the vast majority of objects in the sky and think of the sky, that the sky is mostly dark, empty space, when it's chock full of objects. Many animals, such as dogs, can see in wavelengths further on either side of the human visible spectrum than we can. Thus, a dog may see a deer at night, even upwind, when they think there's nothing present. So very often, there are very normal animals around us at night, and we just have no ability to sense them. Is this all making sense so far to everybody? Okay. Now, the reality is that it's rare that two people agree on just what they're seeing. There are individually different sensory capabilities and very different processing and memory capabilities. So everybody senses the world differently. That leads to endless arguments. And let me give you a really interesting example of that. And I'm so glad this has finally been proven. Heterosexual men really cannot see as many shades of color as heterosexual women. And you know that there are always these jokes about paint stores having signs in the window that says men can't pick out a color of paint without a note from their wives. Oddly enough, most homosexual men see about as many shades as heterosexual women. And we don't know how that works. Perhaps that's why so many homosexual males are designers and decorators and etc. And please understand, I'm not being insensitive about gender choices, etc. That's just how the research has come out. These are very large studies. So again, guys just don't see all those shades if they're heterosexual. If they're homosexual, it's about the same as women. Nobody wants to comment on that? Okay. So with the exception of senses designed to pick up taste, smell, and gravity, all of our known senses are designed to pick up electromagnetic vibrations coming in from a limited portion of the spectrum of wavelengths. Even heat and sound are vibrations. So if you look at the picture in the upper right, that's what's most important here, is that infrasound is just below what we can hear, but elephants hear it just fine. Ultrasound is just above our wavelengths, and bats and other creatures can hear that. So there's a limit to what we can pick up, even though the sounds and vibrations are there. So there are some senses that have been well established. Perception of magnetic fields, including the ability to sense which direction one's facing. Doesn't have to be north, but you can tell which way you're facing. Not everybody can, but somewhere around 2/3 of people can, with men being a little bit better than women at that. And in non-human mammals, they've worked out exactly how this happens. where they've got magnetic sensitive cells that they've found and they can tell what's happening. But in humans, they're not sure. Our magnetic sensing cells turn out to be in different parts of the eyes. And we're not sure how that happens.
Rich, can I interrupt for a second? We're not seeing
course.
your slides.
You're not seeing slides?
No, they went away. Is that true?
I still see them.
Oh, you do? Okay, never mind. I'll figure it out. It's me. Sorry.
Okay, I've got a big sign blocking part of my screen that says you're screen sharing. Cynthia's probably just psychologically blocking on any time I give a talk. So,
I guess so. That must be it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
hey, I wish more people were interrupting, but with questions. Anyway, a great many people can sense other people's magnetic fields. We're not talking about an aura here, which hasn't been proven to exist. Things like Kirlian photography and whatnot have all now been proven to be bunk, which is very sad. But people can sense other people's magnetic fields. There are very good controlled studies on this. People can sense their relationship to vertical. And this isn't associated with balance. It's some other sense. It's the idea of people who are simply independent of the fields that are around them. So we know about perception of magnetic fields. We know about communication through odors, some of which are pheromones. The difference between odors and pheromones is odors are sort of specific, like if you have a young child, the child can pick out your odor and you can pick out your child's odor. That's an odor. A pheromone is a more widespread phenomenon where you can tell when a group of people are sexually ready, things like that. You know, it's not specific to a person. And we have no idea how this works, but a great many people can sense that someone's staring at their back. It works for somewhere around a third of people very, very consistently. And again, there are very large studies on this, but we have no earthly idea how it works. There's all kinds of senses that we don't know about. We know that it's highly likely that the brain can directly sense light, possibly through the pineal gland. We know the skull is translucent. There's all kinds of therapeutic approaches that make use of the skull's translucence. But it looks like people are able to sense light, even if they're completely blind. And it has something to do with the skull's translucence.
Dr. Sherman, on the previous slide, when you said that about like people can sense something behind them, and you mentioned there was research about it, but that you don't really, they don't know how it works. How does a study like that go? Because, is it like, okay, we'll just stand there and you may or may not have something behind, like, how do you even research that, I guess, or test it?
The easiest way is come to our lab at the CLE.
Okay.
And we'll do a little test on it. What the simplest way, these aren't the big time controlled studies, but the simplest way is to have somebody standing in a corner, facing the corner, and you have a semicircle of people behind them, maybe 3 meters away behind them. And everybody but one person turns away from the person that's facing the corner. And the person facing the corner has to say, A, is somebody looking at them, and B, where on the semicircle is the person.
Okay.
So that's the easiest way to do it. The military does it with snipers in trees hundreds of meters away.
Okay.
But again, nobody knows how that works.
Yeah.
Rich, there's a question in the chat here that I saw pop up from Bashan. Can magnetic field be compared to energetic field? I can feel negative or positive energy both in people and places.
Everybody talks about energy fields and whatnot, and I'm going to go into that in a few minutes.
Okay.
But quite frankly, all of the talk about energy fields and auras and whatnot, every time people do controlled studies, well-controlled studies in well-controlled environments, it's 100% flop, except for a few explicit situations that, again, I'll go into. But whether energy fields actually exist, nobody knows, with a few explicit exceptions. And remember, just because the studies flopped doesn't mean they're not there, okay? But magnetic fields have absolutely nothing to do with energy fields as far as we know, what people call energy fields. But here as far as we know. A minority of children can sense colors through the skin. I'm not talking about where you have a different texture that goes along with colors. I'm talking about actual photos of colors, where a whole bunch of students can do this. A lot of children are very, very sensitive to electromagnetic fields, and that results in symptoms similar to temporal lobe epilepsy. But it's minor epilepsy. It's below the level of clinical work. There are many situations in which well-known sensory organs pick up stimuli that are not normally associated with their function. This results in the sensory organ sending signals in its usual way to the usual processing centers in the brain, which results in confusion about just what the organ was actually reacting to. The easiest way for you to prove this to yourself is to close your eyes and put gentle pressure on your eyelids for about 30 seconds. Gentle pressure, okay? You're not squeezing your eyes. In about 30 seconds, you begin to see shapes and colors. The eye is actually sensing pressure, but it can only send out signals which are interpreted as visual. So it's shapes and colors, but not input that it's used to. So now we're getting into the interesting stuff here. Human-produced electromagnetic fields. There are electromagnetic fields all around us. Especially electromagnetic fields that are caused when the ground of a nearby socket is intermittently loose, as well as those caused by brief changes in the Earth's magnetic field due to changes in the solar wind, are picked up by about 20% of humans, mostly children. Superb studies on this. Kids sense magnetic fields. And the newest evidence, though, is on the solar wind, which nobody had any idea that people could detect, but we can. Anyway, by the way, imagine a room with a bunch of people in it and someone saying, "Oh, I feel something going on." And everybody else goes, "You're out of your mind. There's nothing happening." That's because only 1 out of 5 people can sense it. And the intensity of the ability varies between people. So sensing electromagnetic fields causes changes in functions in the temporal lobes and produces effects that mimic very, very minor temporal lobe epilepsy. These include feeling that something is going on around you that you can't quite sense. You get fear, feeling that others are present around you even when there aren't. So again, good studies on this, and it's mostly children. So imagine a kid that gets very nervous all of a sudden and thinks there's somebody there and there isn't. And the insensitive adults have a lot to say to that kid about whether they should be admitting to this or not, right? Something is happening to my ability to change slides. Cynthia, whatever is affecting you is affecting me.
Well, I must say Mercury is retrograde right now, so anything about communication is, up the, whatever Mercury chooses to do with it. And I've had all kinds of issues. But no, yeah, we're seeing your screen. Yeah, it was my deal that I clicked the wrong thing earlier.
Okay. Anyway, all of the effects that I'm talking about, we can all reproduce them in the lab. I used to do this all the time when I had a powerful pulsed electromagnetic field generator. Graduate students have a tendency to play with making their colleagues nervous by setting the sound system of a laptop to about 18 hertz and just leave it on. Almost everybody gets nervous when that happens. And 18 hertz fields are extremely, extremely common in old houses. These fields tend to cause hallucination, a feeling that you're one with the universe, terror, and lots of other feelings depending on where you point the field at the head. They can also stop some headaches, which is why I got involved with them. Many young children are extraordinarily sensitive to low frequency vibrations and electromagnetic fields. As most of you are aware, most structures will vibrate disproportionately to the power of the signal at one or a few frequencies and their harmonics, which happen to resonate with their structures. Anybody that plays with musical instruments knows this. Very low power, low frequency vibrations at about 18 hertz and its harmonics happen to be the resonation point which causes the eye to vibrate. This sets off the rods at the very edge of peripheral vision. So you see a diffuse gray image, which is always changing, and it moves away when you turn to look at it. So especially if you're in an older house, a house with a stone basement, there are going to be 18 hertz waves and harmonics. And the majority of people are going to get nervous, with maybe about 20% of them feeling that something's really, really going on around them. And they're seeing these gray blobs, which they interpret as a manifestation, but it's not. It's just the way your eye works. These same frequencies set your hackles up and cause a fight-flight response if your balance system has very thin walls. So for those of you, when your staples in your ear are connected to a very, very thin wall, the stirrup, again, in your balance system vibrates, and it sets off all kinds of things. It causes you to lose balance. So you'll see children who are exposed to a very low power 18 hertz field lose their balance. They become wobbly and a little disoriented. So again, these frequencies are best transmitted through stone walls, but solid beams do the job just as well. They can be a pain to track because waves tend to bounce around in a structure and reinforce each other in random spots and cancel in others. Okay, infrasound. Remember I showed you that picture of there's infrasound and ultrasound? In the 1980s, they discovered that very low frequency sounds called infrasound can cause people to feel and see ghostly presence. And they've done all kinds of experiments on this. So a lot of people seeing ghosts are people that are exposed to infrasound. People have built ghost rooms and have recorded what's going on in haunted houses, you know, houses that are supposed to be haunted. Whenever you have people exposed to magnetic fields, like here's one study that you can read about with 79 people. A lot of them got dizzy. They reported the sense of a presence. A few people were terrified. However, interestingly enough, they had other people in the room when they didn't turn anything on. And a lot of those people reported sensing something. So that's a placebo. So if you expect it, you might get it. So haunted houses. When they look at haunted houses, many of them have carbon dioxide leaks and carbon monoxide leaks. Okay, this should be monoxide. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why this went away. Hang on. Yeah, my slides are screwing up. I don't know what's wrong with them.
Maybe it's a ghost. Sorry.
Okay. Well,
It's in Siri.
I can send you the slides. Anyway, carbon monoxide is common in very old houses. The symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning are everything that everybody reports when they report a poltergeist or a ghost. You have all these, Vashon saying the spirits are at play. Anyway, so carbon monoxide is a common problem, and it leads to these reports. The last thing is mold. So what a group of investigators has done, and this is only in a couple of studies, is they've gone to houses that are reported as haunted, and they've examined mold in these houses and compared to houses that aren't supposed to be haunted. There's about 5 times as much mold. And it's curious which molds it is. It's the molds that cause hallucinations. So the odds are many haunted houses just have mold that are causing the hallucinations. So that's what I wanted to present. And I think it's interesting that all of a sudden I couldn't show the slides, since that doesn't normally happen to me.
Well, yeah, you're debunking, you know, you're saying they don't exist. It's all about carbon monoxide or temporal lobe epilepsy or, you know,
But
okay.
remember, I started with, there's plenty of stuff we can't explain. So comments, questions, with the whole minute left.
Can we,
Maya.
hi, can we just quickly talk about the difference between ghosts and spirits? Because my understanding of those two are quite different. And I know that it seems like we're using them interchangeably, and I'm not sure if I'm like following that correctly.
No, it's me. I decided to simplify the talk. Spirits don't have to be ghosts, and ghosts aren't spirits. But when you look at the controlled research studies, they usually lump them together. But Maya is absolutely correct that you shouldn't lump them together. And by the way, when you talk about ghosts, when you're doing actual studies of this kind of thing, we're not talking about ghosts of people. And we're talking about spirits. Very often we're talking about spirits, say, of a tree that's been cut down. So old growth timber in the Northwest, when you're talking about a spirit of a tree. And then there's all kinds of sprites and everything else. So this can get incredibly complicated.
And like you're saying, with all research, you have to start with operational definitions to at least define in your research what you're talking about and define it, because even if you say the word ghosts, that can mean very different things to different people, or spirits, or I'm sure other terms too.
So most of the studies that have been done were attempting to look at ghosts. And I suspect that a lot of them were actually looking at spirits. Other questions, comments? I saw another hand up, but I don't know where it was.
Well, Kirk made the remark, mold is like catnip for ghosts.
Could be.
I do know
really
that
don't know.
the military is working with EMF weaponry. At least I thought they still were, and they were directed energy laboratories for weapons. And I think last year, Kirk, was it last year or the year before, there was incidents of people supposedly having EMF at some of our embassies or consulates or somewhat. And they were getting some of the symptoms that you were discussing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was the one that did those early studies, and they're still going on, but we won't talk about them right now, please.
Why?
Period.
Why?
Because they're classified.
Oh.
I'm serious.
Yeah,
Okay.
the part I was bringing up was unclass. So just wanted to share that, but and give classified information.
Yeah, also known as Cuba syndrome.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
exactly.
Yeah, that there was an article in the Times about it recently, and it's going to be very, very hard to prove, but you can send electromagnetic fields with a PEMF generator, a real PEMF generator that can light a 40-watt bulb. You can send that a couple of 100 meters, and it's very, very hard to detect. And if you use a very strong one, you can weaponize it.
That's when they call it rock and roll, right?
Okay, I don't want to shut down comments. I just don't want military folks bringing up classified stuff. Okay, yeah, next.
I'm really curious about the, EEG findings. You say that it's sometimes confused as temporal lobe epilepsy. Is it actually, are we seeing the seizures in the temporal lobe, or are they psychogenic? What else is going on in the brain? That's, My,
I don't believe that any of the studies used EEG.
That would
oh,
be,
they just had a seizure
Yeah, and they have symptoms.
and they
Very
somehow
mild.
called it temporal lobe epilepsy.
that, that would be an
Stanford,
They're
interesting
very,
Stanford
study.
does studies
symptoms
with
are very
EEG.
well known.
Someone's dissertation is just waiting
They
to be
didn't
done.
record them. They have no idea that it was epilepsy. They were probably psychogenic.
Stanford is doing
Right.
EEG studies on this.
Excuse me?
Stanford does EEG studies on how we are responding to electromagnetic fields.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think Martijn Arns is actually a part of that.
All right.
What would be interesting would be a study on some of these mediums, you know, that supposedly can have that extra sensory capability to talk to, you know,
Well, they've
spirit.
done a lot of those studies and a lot of those mediums fail.
Really?
Yeah.
All mediums so far have failed to collect over $1 million reward for anyone who can prove that they can do that. So there's a lot of money out there if you can prove that you actually are a medium. So, you know, go for it, guys. There's $1 million waiting for you.
And as the geologist at the core here, the only thing I would bring up is, every, I don't know, 100,000 years or so often the poles reverse polarity. So what'll happen when and I think we're due for one not too long in the geologic future. So what happens when the poles reverse,
Well,
to
I
all
don't
this
know, Rich. What was it
magnetic,
like last time?
huh?
I said, what was it like for you, Rich, last time?
There were no human. That's mean. That's mean.
You know, it's funny that although wasn't quite there, they've been looking at what happened to the early civilizations when the poles reversed last time. And I don't think they've come up with anything coherent.
Well, how could they? How can they actually do research on that now?
Well, they're looking the same way you do if a tsunami hits or anything else. You look for changes in a culture, changes in where people settle. Did everybody
so
move
we're
out?
talking
You
about
don't know.
1,000 years ago when papyrus wasn't invented yet? I mean, what data can you show me?
Ice cores. Well, that's how they know. Anyway,
I see.
Well, it's
ice
more
cores and
recent.
the poles.
Poles changed
Yeah.
more recently than that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay,
Oh, sorry.
for
Didn't
all of
mean
you
to.
doubters, where is the North Magnetic Pole today? Come on, guys.
It's reverse from where isn't it it's reverse. It's in the
It
south,
didn't
isn't it?
reverse today, but
No.
it shuttled over.
Right.
So where do you think it is, guys? Why don't any of your compasses work the way they're supposed to? Why does that declination sitting on your compass flop right now? Because the little sucker moved.
About 18 degrees.
Well, now it's more.
Okay.
So if you're as far north as I am, northwest,
Oh,
we're up to 22 degrees.
okay.
It's moving over to the center of Canada. So it keeps moving.
According to
If there's
AI,
anything to it, it ought to affect us.
according to AI, the North Magnetic Pole is currently 85.762 north latitude and 139.298 east longitude, and it's drifting across the Canadian Arctic towards Russia.
That's right. The little sucker keeps moving very, very quickly. So if you want to do a study on people's ability to use the magnetic field, you ought to see a difference in your data than data collected 20 years ago. That would be very interesting if someone wants to do that.
Sorry,
Thanks
didn't
for
mean
bringing that
to.
up, Ann. And Cynthia, the oldest records that we have of people migrating are about 6,000 years old, well before
Yeah.
papyrus. They're all from on cuneiform tablets.
Yeah, I
As
have a
you know.
tablet too.
Different kind of tablet.
But I
Okay,
mean, you
anything
know,
else?
I mean, you know, there, well, anyway. You've researched this more than I, so I don't mean to be, you know,